Today in the 21st century, skateboard parks are common architecture. They're not as common as, say, a basketball court or a tennis court, but it would not be unusual to find a skateboard park in even the smallest, remotest American city. But if you go looking for old skate parks with some historical weight to them, you're going to have a much harder time. Globally, there are approximately 20 skate parks from the 1970s still in existence, and there are even fewer from the 1960s. And that's because skate parks, by and large, when they fall out of popularity, they just get destroyed. This is very similar to what happened with movie theaters and movie palaces in the United States. When places stop drawing in the crowds and stop making money, they just get knocked down. In the United States, there are about a dozen movie palaces left, even though these huge grandiose constructions were a major attraction when they were new. Because skateboard parks and movie theaters both had this cycle of being built, being celebrated, then being knocked down and lost forever, I use movie theater metaphors when I'm talking about skate park history. And in this video, I'm going to use metaphors comparing the eras of movie theaters with the eras of skateboard parks. I call the first era of skate parks the vaudeville era. This is the 1960s, and this is when spaces that were used for other things were then turned over to skateboarders for short periods of time. This is similar to what happened when the projection movie was invented. Vaudeville theaters kind of welcomed in the projectors and then used those as parts of vaudeville shows. These parks or hills or whatever welcomed skateboarders for short times, but then stopped being used. Many of these still exist today. We look at them and don't think of them as skate parks, but they're the precursors to skate parks. So we are going to look at a few of those right now. Before we go into these first few pre-skate parks, we have to talk about why they needed to exist in the first place. It's pretty obvious, but there are two major reasons. The first one predates skateboards by many, many years. It goes back to those famous constructions known as gliders, coasters, flyers, pushmobiles, whatever. The single roller skate nailed to a plank or a 2x4 with a handlebar made often of an orange crate or a milk crate or something. These things existed in the early 1900s, and they were really loud. Those metal skate wheels grinding up and down the pavement were very loud, and people did not like the sound. So we have complaints dating back to the early 1920s of people wanting these to be outlawed because they were just such a noisy nuisance. Unsurprisingly, skateboards made the same sound because it was the same device. It was the same wheels, so skateboards initially were perceived as loud, annoying devices. The second reason is kind of obvious, because it is dangerous. Skateboards are dangerous, and I say this as a skateboarder myself, but when you put a human body on a wheeled platform, everything around you becomes a hazard. A dog, a person, the ground itself, cars, walls, everything is a hazard that can hurt you. So these two reasons combined, the loudness and the danger, made groups of people get together and ban skateboards. When they were popular beginning in the mid-1960s, approximately 1963, we go from 63 to 66, we see a ton of municipal bans on skateboards. And this was received by children very poorly. There were organized groups of skateboarders who did skateboard protests. They did letter writing campaigns. They said, how can you ban our pastime? This is something that is not hurting anyone. You're just annoyed by it and afraid that we might get hurt or you might get hurt. So you're pushing us off the streets. We need somewhere to go. As a result, a lot of cities said, we're going to give these skateboard devices a safe place to do what they want to do. And that's how many of these pre-skate parks came to exist. The other reason was that people saw potential money-making in it. And that was the other side of it. We saw people open up spaces for skateboarding because they wanted to attract kids who they could either sell things to or charge admission to. So these are the two types of skate parks that we see beginning in the 1960s and going all through even till today. We have municipal, city, county, whatever skate parks which are given as a place for you to skate. And then we have private enterprise providing places that charge you to skate. An important flashpoint in skatepark history is National City, California, and their roller rink known as Sweetwater. In 1957, before we even had skateboards, Sweetwater was encouraging kids to bring their coasters in and use the rink surface. They even built and sold their own version that they claimed was somehow superior to the homemade coaster. In 1963, a different owner took over Sweetwater, but at the same time, National City outlawed skateboarding. Sweetwater then started to build and sell skateboards. I don't have any record that they welcomed skateboards on the surface of the rink, so that is why I consider this a flashpoint rather than the first skate park. Sweetwater Roller Rink. The earliest example that I can find of a roller rink welcoming skateboards onto their surface was actually in Escondido, California, at a roller rink called Ups and Downs. On March 24th, 1964, they started having skateboard sessions where they would let people come and skate on their surface. Now, this lasted for a whole year until 1965, which is a long time when you compare it to the coming and going of all the other roller rinks. Most of the roller rinks that welcomed skateboards only did it for a single day or a couple of get-togethers where they would have contests or exhibitions. Ups and Downs kept it going for a whole year. Yes, skateboards grew out of roller skates, but going around in circles on a flat roller rink surface is not exactly what skateboarding is about. So to look at another type of vaudeville skate park, we need to actually get off this green screen and go out into the real world. During the vaudeville era of skate parks, we got to see how people conceived of what you were supposed to even do on a skateboard. Some people thought of it as an extension of roller skating, while others thought of it as an extension of surfing. Now, in a lot of these early spaces, such as Ups and Downs in California or the roller rinks in Maine, it was a flat surface dedicated to skateboarding. Some who perceived it as a surfing activity set aside hills, and we are now headed to Moberly, Missouri to look at one of the first hills ever dedicated to skateboarding. In July of 1964, a skater named Ben White apparently introduced skateboarding to Moberly, and he and one of his friends, Jerry Roberts, kind of popularized skateboarding here on Fisk Avenue. It was so popular with skateboarders that the city council said, we're going to give skaters this street at the end of the summer. So for about 2 weeks, it was turned over to only skaters. No cars were even allowed to drive here. Similar sanctioned hills popped up across the country, most notably in Sunbury, Pennsylvania, and Greenwood, Indiana. But I want to talk about how hills inspired skate parks and how the very first purpose-built skate park was almost a direct copy of a very popular skateboarding hill. In late 64, early 65, Stockton, California had a really popular skate spot on the El Dorado Bridge. Reportedly, hundreds of skaters at a time would convene there and just have sessions going down this hill. And it was really popular partially because it was a nice slope, but also because it had a 4-foot-high wall separating it from the bridge, and that kind of acted a bit like the face of a wave. So it was very popular for that. The problem was that so many kids were skating here that they were creating trouble. They moved one of the signs, they broke through the fence. It was just creating a lot of hassle for the people who lived in the area. Skateboarding on the El Dorado Bridge was such a problem that the city of Stockton explicitly banned it there. They put up a sign and everything, but then they also banned it in like 10 other places. Pershing Avenue Bridge, Channel Street, parking garage, the subway station at Minor Avenue, Central Public Library, and 4 other overpasses and underpasses across the city. Seeing kind of an opportunity for a publicity stunt, a nearby discount store by the name of Villa Fair said they would build an exact replica of this hill in their new big parking lot. They would provide the land, the concrete, the supervision, the insurance. All they asked was for the city recreation department to design it and put it all together, and then they would take care of the rest. Amazingly, the city of Stockton thought this was kind of a cool idea, so they were all on board with it until the city budget came out for the year, and it turned out that they were running really low on recreation funds, so they didn't have the money to spend even on the labor and design of this thing. What they ended up doing instead was saying, okay, yeah, we're just going to have a bunch of sanctioned skateboard competitions in our parks instead of do all this with this Villa Fair over here. The day after the city said they were going to start having contests, Villa Fair started to have hourly skateboard demos at their shop. And then the city put onto the calendar a skateboard contest, and Villa Fair did the same thing. They scheduled theirs for May 8th. The city of Stockton ended up having theirs on May 15th. So the two of them were butting heads. And unfortunately, I lose track of what happened at Villa Fair, and I don't know if they actually had the contest because the contest at Stockton Parks and Rec only had 40 participants. So it wasn't a humongous thing. But I'm assuming that Villa Fair lost out in this deal. The important crossover point from vaudeville to Nickelodeon took place on May 22nd and May 23rd of 1965 in Anaheim, California. Taking place in La Palma Stadium was the National Skateboard Championships. This was the first ever national skateboard competition. And the reason why I say it is a crossover point between the two eras is because they built their own ramps and they constructed their own skateboarding surfaces, but they put it in a baseball stadium that was currently active as a baseball stadium. So they had purpose-built ramps, a purpose-built slalom course, and it was only supposed to be there for the period of time that the competition was taking place. This event was incredibly important in the popularity of skateboarding and in the subsequent development of skate parks. It was broadcast on national television on Wide World of Sports. Skateboarder magazine dedicated almost its entire third issue to covering this event. The amount of eyes that saw skateboarding at this event was tremendous. They constructed a 21-foot high, 20-foot wide, 125-foot long Masonite slalom track. Now, unlike what skateboarders are currently familiar with, they actually mounted the Masonite rough side up, which is just unbelievable. If you think Masonite burn is bad, try falling on it on the wrong side. I can only imagine the amount of bloodshed that took place on this ramp because it started 21 feet high, but before the competition started, they said, that's too much, and they lowered it to 11 feet. So almost half the height. I don't know what happened, but it was probably really gross. They also threw down a couple of concrete slabs for flatland and freestyle competitions. And one of the spokespeople for the NSC said, quote, "It is time to take skateboards away from sidewalks and toward specially constructed skateboard runs."